We must force the Jewish experts on technology, engineering, health, and industry to stay in Palestine. They may not be allowed to leave with all the knowledge and experience that they have received by living on our land and eating of its goods, while we were humiliated and suffering. Basically, what this says is, look, you guys have oppressed us, and the only reason that you're knowledgeable and smart is because you have oppressed us. So now you have to be our slaves. Hello, good people. My name is Doran Shafrir, and I am a philosopher, which means that I'm so grateful to be in this studio. I'm actually shooting a couple of videos back to back before I get kicked out. So let's do this quickly. Today, I want to show you something that not many people are aware of. Almost all of you watching, I presume, are aware of what happened on October the 7th of 2023 in Israel. That's the Hamas attack on Israel. But I want to show you something that not a lot of people know about, including Israelis. And I'm taking this from a special report made by the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. It's like a research center. It's from a large report that's been compiled by a guy named Yonatan Dechuch Halevi. Yes, I can say ch because I'm Jewish. And the thing I want to show you comes from basically like a council of sort that the Gazans made about 2 years before the October attack. So we're talking September 2021. And in this council, in this meeting, shall we say, they basically made plans for the liberation of Palestine. Like, you know, we all know that we want to liberate Palestine, right? Abolish the evil colonialist state of Israel. But what do we do when it's done? What is the plan? You know, so you've liberated Palestine. Now what? So basically, this council was in charge of, having a couple of experts sit together and discuss what do we do, how does it look like in reality? What do we do once Palestine is finally liberated and the Zionist entity collapses? So I'm going to basically walk you through the recommendations that this council has made. So let's get right into it. So the first point is this. The sovereign body that will lead the liberation is the Council for Palestinian Liberation, which will be made up of all Palestinian power structures and of the Arabs who embrace the idea of liberating Palestine, backed up by the friendly nations. So I want to explain this point. Basically, it says who the governing body is going to be. So it's going to be made out of all Palestinian power structures, right? That's Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, all these lovely organizations. And the Arabs who embrace the idea of liberating Palestine. That means cooperation with the Arabs, with the Arab countries, basically, right? Because the Palestinians are Arabs, obviously. And when they say backed up by friendly nations, that basically is a code name for Iran, right? Because the Iranians are Iranians or Persians, some might call them. They're not Arabs. Okay, so that's basically the idea here. It's, to kind of be a proxy without saying that you're a proxy. It's something like that. Point number 2. Freeing Palestine is a collective responsibility that applies to the entire Muslim Ummah and is spearheaded by the Palestinian people. So this is basically an Islamist point, right? Freeing Palestine is the responsibility of all Muslims. The Ummah is a Muslim term. It means like the Muslim collective or something like that, okay? So basically, it states that, we Palestinians, we're fighting on behalf of the Muslim Ummah. It's kind of the mirror argument of Israel sometimes says that it's fighting on behalf of the free world or something like that, like as the representative of a Western democracy, right? So saying that freeing Palestine is a collective responsibility of the Muslim Ummah and that the Palestinians are spearheading this effort, that's like the Palestinian version of the Israeli argument. So one side is like the West and the other side is like the Muslim Ummah, in a sense. Which is kind of funny because many pro-Palestinians make fun of the pro-Israelis when they make that argument. So yeah, they make the same argument, but inverted. Point number 3. At the head of the council shall be a leadership that will become the temporary presidential council that will rule over Palestine until an election shall be called and a government shall be created. Basically, right, it says that it will be a presidential structure until there could be elections. By the way, did you know that Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, is, I think, 11 years into his 4-year term? I'm sure that's coincidental. Point number 4. Immediately upon liberation, the forces of liberation shall create a document that will state Palestinian values and stress our nationality, our Arab identity, and our Islamic values. That document shall be made by experts in the fields of politics, law, and media. Basically, that kind of mimics the Israeli Declaration of Independence, right? That's also a document that's been drafted and signed upon the establishment of the state. But there are many countries made like this, of course. Point number 5, the Palestinian legal system will be managed with temporary laws that will be valid so long as they do not contradict the previous document. The disappearance of Israel does not mean the disappearance of its legal system. We may not cancel a law without introducing a new one in its stead. Basically, they want to inherit Israel's legal system as long as it doesn't contradict the previous section, which talked about, right, Arab identity and Islamic identity. So, anything about Israel being a Jewish state obviously wouldn't work with that. And of course, like the Jewish law of return and all that. Point number 6. The forces of liberation shall put into effect a series of laws that will be prepared in advance, starting with a law that grants control over all state land and the law of return. Basically, it means nationalizing the land, right? But this is a very big deal in Palestinian culture because their view of the 48 war, what they refer to as the Nakba, the catastrophe in Arabic, is that Palestinians were basically, the land was stolen from them. So it's really a big deal for them to nationalize the land so that they can give it back to the people. Now, of course, there's a problem with that because the way in which Palestinians track the status of refugee is kind of weird, right? Because if you have any relation to a Palestinian ancestor, right, who was in the Nakba, then you are considered a refugee. So in effect, a piece of land that belonged to someone or, it didn't really belong to them, right? But if they lived on it, now there would be many people who can claim this land. But of course, this is ignored. Point number 7, the statement that declares Palestinian sovereignty over the lands lost in 48 shall be prepared in advance, right? This works very well with what I've just explained. Point number 8. A statement shall be made to the UN, according to which Palestine is the inheritor of the occupation state, that means Israel, of course, and that it enjoys all the rights that previously belonged to the occupation state before. So basically, it's just destroying Israel and creating Palestine in its stead and inheriting its status. Point number 9. Upon liberation, all of the national agreements signed by the occupation state, again, that's Israel, will be dependent on the will of the state of Palestine. And so these agreements could be cancelled. So essentially, it's this is like, okay, so we inherit the state of Israel and, we like all the agreements that Israel signed. So, you have to honor these agreements with us. But if we want to cancel the agreement with you, well, too bad for you. Point number 10. Palestine will probably inherit Israel's border agreements with Egypt, Jordan, and Greece. Greece obviously doesn't border Israel on land, but it borders by sea. So the same goes for all shipping rights. So again, they just want to, inherit all of the international agreements. Point 11. A panel of experts shall be called in advance, starting now, that shall study all current agreements that Israel, it's in quotes, has. The panel will form recommendations for each of these agreements, which will be binding to Palestine and which will not be binding to Palestine. So again, it's like convening some experts to basically pick and choose which agreement they intend to honor and which agreement they want to throw into the garbage bin. Point 12. A declaration shall be made to all the international community to make Palestine's foreign policy clear. It will be based on respect and cooperation. The first diplomatic meeting will take place in Jerusalem, Al-Quds in Arabic, and promote development and stability in the region and the world. Basically, that's what every country says, right? Developing stability in the region and in the world. The important part here is that the meetings have to take place in Jerusalem because the Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital, which, of course, Israel also claims as well. Point 13. A man may not lose ownership over his own land, so all land will be returned to the original owners as long as no strategically significant facilities were built upon it, in which case the person will be compensated. Again, this works with the narrative of the Palestinians deserving the land that they used to own, although you could argue what own means. But again, this is not feasible, right? Because there would be many, many claimants to each piece of land. But yeah, it's a very important part of the Palestinian narrative and identity, this idea of returning. For example, when I speak to Palestinians from Ramallah, let's say, if I ask them where they're from, their answer is not Ramallah, right? Their answer is Haifa or Asdod or something like that. Like they would say what city their grandparents is from. So that's an interesting thing to note. Point 14. We will establish a new Palestinian coin. We should start using it as soon as possible to get people used to it. We could also agree to temporarily use a neighboring Arab state's currency. At any rate, we should stop using the shekel. The shekel is the Israeli currency, of course. So, this was written about 3 years ago. The Palestinians still use the shekel, so I guess that didn't work so well for them. But yeah, a man can hope, I guess. Point 15. This is a lovely one. As for the settler Jews, I just want to make it clear. When they say settler Jews, they don't mean people who live outside of the 67 borders. They mean all Jews in Israel. Okay. So as for the settler Jews, a combatant should be killed, but an escaping Jew should be either judged for his crimes or given stay to live or to be assimilated. This is an issue that will require us to be humane in the spirit that Islam is well known for. Wonderful. So when they say that an escaping Jew should be judged for his crimes, just to make it clear, living on land that is perceived to be stolen from the Palestinian constitutes a crime. So essentially, they would say that almost all Jews living in Israel are criminals. So it's kind of misleading, but just to make it clear that we're on the same page. Point 16. This one is fantastic. Look at this. We must force the Jewish experts on technology, engineering, health, and industry to stay in Palestine. They may not be allowed to leave with all the knowledge and experience that they have received by living on our land and eating of its goods, while we were humiliated and suffering. Basically, what this says is, look, you guys have oppressed us. And the only reason that you're knowledgeable and smart is because you have oppressed us. So now you have to be our slaves, in a sense. Right? You have to stay and you have to teach us everything that you've learned. F you guys, basically. So this one is lovely. Point number 17. We must start returning the refugees by coordinating with the host nations. The right of return shall be applied to them. This refers, of course, to the descendants of the refugees of the 1948 war between the Arabs and the Israelis. And as I've said, the status of refugee in the Arab world is kind of funny. Like the Palestinians are basically eternal refugees. They have never been settled anywhere. And thus, if my grandfather was a refugee, I am also a refugee, even if I have an American citizenship and I lead very good lives. So it's kind of funny in this sense. Point 18. Once Israel, in quotes, has collapsed, our security forces must put their hands on the names of the Israeli agents and recruiters. With it, we will purify Palestine and the Arab and Muslim homelands of the human scum who have corrupted us. This refers to any Arab that's been in contact with the Israeli security forces. Israel has extensive intelligence networks inside of the Arab and Muslim world. And of course, these networks need collaborators. So what this point basically says is that it's very important for the Palestinians to get their hands on the names of these collaborators so that they could, well, take care of them. Here's the thing, though, such lists do not exist, and many people in the Mossad, for example, they refer to the agents by code names, especially if they're very high profile. So no such lists exist. So I'm afraid the newly formed state of Palestine will have to be disappointed here. Point 19. We must compile a guidance book that will explain the mechanism of return for the refugees, and we must demand the international community fulfill its responsibility to assist in this and to help absorb them into their city of origin. Basically, that's more talk about the right of return and returning the refugees, and it's like the entire Palestinian national narrative, in a sense, is built upon this idea. Point 20. Once the final action to free Palestine begins, that basically means like the big war. That's what they hoped would happen on October 7th, right? Our fighters will be busy with fighting. So we must create citizen forces that will include men over 40 years old and women. Their main job will be to secure the primary resources of the land and to survey them. Each group will know what it will secure in advance, so they should be prepared in advance. Here's the thing. When I say resources, what this really means is the towns and the cities, right? So securing a resource in this sense means capturing a city, right? Conquering a city. And because the rest of the fighters will be busy fighting the cursed Zionists, then you should draft, women and older people to garrison the city, essentially. So this point refers to basically garrisoning the Jewish cities while the fighting goes on, so that when the fighting ends, you could judge them for their crimes. So this concludes with, some statements and some quotes from the Quran, saying that it's time to act, the time of, freeing Palestine is coming. Allah promised us victory, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, that was the document. And I'm very glad to have shared this with you. And thank you for sticking around so far. And I'll see you next time.